Kal Halal, Yahweh, Bahashim Yahushai, Bahashim, Rakach Kadash. All praise, honor, and glory go to the Most High Yahweh, in the name of His Son Yahushai. I wanted to go into this account of Samson. Samson was a Danite who also was a judge of the nation of Yasharala Israel in a time period after Joshua went on to the spirit world, right before the time of David's reign. And it was a time where there was no, right before the people asked for a king. And in this particular account, after Samson, showed some little bit of folly because he was chasing after them Canaanite women, and he was what we call today like a sucker for love. He pretty much revealed to the heathen the source of his strength, and because of that, he was subjected to the Philistines. The Philistine people who were had a hand in having the people of Yasharala Israel in captivity for a while, subjection. And it remained that way in some sorts until the time of David, when David was able to, slay one of their top warriors, Goliath, cut off his head. And from that point on, David was used to put the heathen in subjection. This story also details spiritually, because in chapter 18 it talks about how the tribe of Dan went off, and they were one of the first tribes of the nation of Yasharala Israel to pretty much dedicate themselves to idols and other gods of the heathens. And so when we read about his death, spiritually you could think about how they were omitted from the tribe of Israel, and Joseph was given 2 tribes. When you go into the book of Revelation, it doesn't mention them as one of the 12 tribes having a gate. But also spiritually, when you think about it, you want to think about how the Lord uses Yasharala Israel to inflict his revenge towards the other nations for doing their detestable acts, and also when they are used to come against the people that are the apple of his eye, the Israelites, the Yasharala. Because after they captured Samson, they plucked out his eyes, they pretty much had him in chains, and he was in servitude towards the Philistines, and they actually used him to make fun because he was such a great warrior. But once he lost his strength, he was ridiculed. And in chapter 23, I'm going to read this in the ESV. Let's go through the whole chapter. It says, "Now the Lord's," meaning like the top officials of the Philistines, gathered to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their power, and to rejoice. And they said, you always got to remember the heathen nations, they were given other gods that are not gods, but they were under the delusion that these were their powers that allowed them to be dominant, when actually it was just because the Lord, judged his people for their detestable acts. Because the Israelites are always supposed to be the ones in the rule and rulership of this earth. But because we went off so many times, he allowed these other nations to believe they were in control and had us in captivity or subjection, like we are today with the Edomite nation. It says, our power has given Samson, our enemy, into our hand. Once again, proving that they were in delusion. They didn't really understand the truth that, our people went off. Samson, the one that went off. And that's the delusion of these heathen nations and the wicked. They really believe that they had some sort of power. It says, and when the people saw him, they praised their power, for they said, our power has given our enemy into our hand, the ravisher of our country, who has killed many of us. So the Lord put the wool over their eyes for a reason. He set this time up. You got to remember, the Lord always sets everything up for a reason. This is his movie. He plays everything out the way he wants it to go. And you're going to see what he did to these Philistines that were believing that they, were given a victory or able to, inflict some kind of damage to the nation of Yasharala Israel. In particular, praising a God that is not a God, when we know the Most High Yahweh is the only true power. It gives any kind of strength and power to those Dalahayim, which is the powers, the sons of the power, sons of Yahweh. And that's it. These gods of the earth are nothing. It says, and when their hearts were merry, they said, call Samson that he may entertain us. So they called Samson out of the prison, and he entertained them. They made him stand between the pillars. Now, the entertainment could have been, they could have had him like jumping on two legs. We don't know what it really was, but since they were Canaanites, Hamites, probably was some kind of detestable thing that they had him do, because the Hamites are known for that. It says, and Samson said to the young man who held him by the hand, let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against them. It says, now the house was full of men and women. All the lords of the Philistine were there, so all their most, prominent men were there. It says, and on the roof, there were about 3,000 men and women who looked on while Samson entertained. Once again, it's entertainment. Could have been whatever their customs were. Anything to bring a laugh. Probably had them do things that were probably against the Israelite way of living, our heritage. It says, then Samson called to Yahweh and said, oh Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, please remember me and strengthen me only this once. Because he knew that he had did something he shouldn't have did when he revealed his power, when he really revealed his strength to these heathens. And he knew that was his punishment. But he was asking for mercy. And the whole point is this, we got to not be afraid to ask the Most High Yahweh for mercy at any given point that we're in. We could be at our lowest. We could be at the bottom of the barrel, which we are right now, but we see a new thing happening the Lord is doing. So we got to continue to have hope in the mercies of the Heavenly Father. It says, oh Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, that I may be avenged on the Philistine for my two eyes. Because once again, as I mentioned, they plucked out his two eyes. It says, and Samson grabbed the two middle pillars on which the house rested, and he leaned his weight against them, his right hand on one and his left hand on the other. And Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. So he was willing to sacrifice himself to show revenge for the things that the Philistines done to him. And since it's the Lord's movie, the Lord set all this up. They were going too far. Sort of like the so-called white man, the nation of Edom, is going too far. And how he's got to feel something. Something has to happen to show that he's not truly the power that's given him all the ability to do the things he's doing. It says, then he bowed with all his strength, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people that were in it. So the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those whom he had killed during his life. So the Lord showed vengeance. Vengeance is the Lord. It's always the Lord's. It says, then his brothers and all his family came down and took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorar and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah, his father. He had judged Israel 20 years. So, just a brief account of the Lord showing his plan. Lord not letting the heathen get too much victory against the people of Yasharallah, because at that time, Dan was still counting upon the number of the tribes of Israel. Then it also represents, if you read going to chapter 18, how the Danites went totally off, and how they were omitted from the actual covenant that we talk about in Revelation. So there's a lot of meat into it. Diving into yourself, get some more understanding. I just wanted to really touch on the fact that the Lord always shows vengeance toward his people, for his people. And that, just as Samson was at his lowest of the low, he still asked for mercy from the Lord to do his will. To regain his strength, gain the power that he once, lost. And we got to do the same, in these last moments of these last days, We're at the lowest of the low, we're the poor of the earth. But the Lord has something special for his people, Yasharallah Israel. And just as he allowed Samson to destroy these Hamites, real soon he's going to bring destruction upon this earth, mainly Babylon, America, and the land of Israeli. And he's going to have these heathens in subjection that live past all the destruction to come. And then once again, Yasharallah Israel will be on top. So I just want to bring it out. Hope it's edifying to someone out there. With that, just give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakach, Kadash. Double honors to all the apostles, the elders, teachers, preachers, priests, bishops that came before me, taught me the truth through the videos, starting with the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. And Shalom, peace be to you, to the holy elect, which I pray in the number up to next time, Yahweh.